Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Friday, February 28th, 2025. Yes, we have reached the end of the second month of 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
And very noisily clanging in the background with all of his many accoutrements. Our guest today, our Hollywood commentary columnist, executive producer of 6 network television shows, author of The Martini Shot, both a column and a podcast on the Ankler Network, and the co-creator of Ricochet, Rob Long. Hi, Rob.
Hey, John. Who canceled?
Christine Rosen.
Okay. So I know that I'm replacing somebody. I never know. I just want to know who it was. Whose shoes I'm filling. It's not like you wanted me. It's like you wanted somebody else, and they said no, so you had to come to me.
You know, in the 70s, not to get too old, but Johnny Carson used to have 2 guest hosts a week. At some point, his contract got so distended that he was like, they'll pay him $100 million to be on the show once a week, and then he would have guest hosts. One day he had the guest host Dick Shawn on, who was a sort of an actor of the 60s and 70s, probably best known for playing the hippie and the producers. And Dick Shawn decided to do a bit, and he overturned Johnny Carson's desk. He pushed it over to have a hilarious moment, and he was blackballed for the rest of Carson's tenure. So, Rob, I don't want you pushing over your desk.
I won't. But Dick Shawn famously died on stage. You know, he died on stage.
Oh, that's right.
And people thought it was a bit for like 5 minutes. He sat there and died. And just people thought, this is hilarious. But this is talk about commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. You know who else died on? Albert Brooks's and Super Dave Osborne, Bob Einstein's father, who played Funkhauser on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Their father was a famous radio comedian who went by the name of Parkya Karkas, was being honored at a dinner in Los Angeles in 1958 and keeled over and died on the dais.
Yeah.
So that's how you're going out with your boots on.
Yes. So now that we know that no one is listening to this anymore.
This is always your bit. People love this stuff. And we're going to talk about show business in the second half of the show because the Oscars are this weekend, and there are some interesting things to be said about the Oscars and about Oscar season. But before we do that, did you know that Donald Trump never called Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator? Because I didn't know that, because I heard him calling him a dictator last week. And then yesterday, in a joint appearance with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Trump said, did I say that? I didn't say that, about whether or not Zelensky was a dictator. Zelensky, of course, coming to the White House today to sign whatever this minerals deal, which is all putative or forward-thinking, because in fact, there's not a lot of mineral mining going on in the Ukraine as the war is going on. But Trump wants repayment,
and also the only mines that have previously been mined already are currently in Russia-held territory. So good luck.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations to Donald Trump for negotiating a future minerals deal with Ukraine. We don't know where this goes. We know 2 things. Trump and Marco Rubio and everybody are saying, we want to bring this war to an end as soon as possible, which, of course, everybody wants wars to end as soon as possible, as long as the results of the ending of the war are favorable to the parties that want to end it. And that's always the question with a country like Ukraine, which the initial thinking was they were going to basically have a peace and surrender negotiated up on top of them and shoved down their throats by the United States. Things appear to be a little more complicated than that. Europe starting to actually make security guarantees, and Trump saying in his 200-hour press conference cabinet meeting that he thought that, look, there are going to be Americans working in Ukraine harvesting all of these rare earth minerals, and that will function as a deterrent to Russian aggression, because Russia isn't going to want to be killing American workers who are in the mines. This story, like all other stories about Trump, can't take it quite at face value, don't quite know what's going on. Abe, as our resident person who's actually been to Ukraine, maybe you have some thoughts?
Well, not really as a result of that, but more on Trump. Yeah. To me, the Ukraine proposal is starting to look more and more like his Gaza plan in its sort of vagueness. And even though he's saying we're right there, we're going to get there, the sense I get from the European leaders visiting him, I'm not talking about the coming of Zelensky, but the Macron and Starmer, is that they're trying to cajole him in some direction, and I don't know to what degree they're succeeding at all. And there's just this sort of the bonds of reality around the whole thing are very loose and seem to be getting looser. And I don't really understand what's happening. I mean, even John, when you talk about his saying that he doesn't remember calling Zelensky a dictator, it's sort of like there's just a big fog around this. The whole thing is sort of atomizing as it's supposedly coming together. But I see more of the atomization than I see what he claims, which is we're getting closer. And he also says it has to happen soon or it won't happen at all, which sounds desperate. It doesn't sound sure to me.
Well, it either sounds desperate or it sounds like, okay, well, you know what, this may not work, and then the war is going to continue. And I guess we as America are not going to participate as much in it as we were before, if at all. So the Europeans will have to step up. But his insistence that he's the one who wants to end the war, he's going to bring the war to an end. There are too many people dying on both sides. It's just heart sick. There's just so much death. And apparently the Russians don't care about the death. And it's not that the Ukrainians don't care about the death, but that the Ukrainians have their national sovereignty and the fear of being swallowed up by a totalitarian monster as they were 100 years ago by the Soviet Union is stronger than their desire to conclude the war on terms unfavorable to them. And so maybe he's acknowledging that the I can end this in a day fantasy is a fantasy. He's just like backing away from the idea that only he can solve.
Yeah.
So
well, he also said if the deal doesn't work, I think that they're going to move all the Ukrainians to Jordan and Egypt.
Right.
Maybe the Ukrainians can do the demolition work in Gaza in preparation for digging the rare earth minerals out.
But on a more serious note, like, this is part of what Trump, like life with Trump is, which is that there is no yesterday. We just sort of have to get used to, again, there never having been anything in the past that has ever happened. And so it can be discombobulating because we know we remember he said this about Zelensky.
It
wasn't that long ago. You know, it's like my grandfather used to say, like, we said, Pop, you don't remember? He said, I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning. That's Trump now. You know, it's like, but we remember what you had. I watched you eat oatmeal. So, but so we have to just get used to this, like, whatever happened yesterday doesn't matter. And that's an extremely maddening thing if you're another country rather than, the media here and sort of used to it.
I just want to point this out, too, because I think sometimes people miss this about Trump. He also does it with a kind of wink. People get crazy, and he goes, he said, I said that? What? I would say such a thing? I don't know. There's a half joke to it, which I don't think is healthy either. I mean, not that not that it would be good if it were a earnest denial either, but it goes to the meaninglessness of all of the developments. Everything could be a joke. Maybe it didn't happen. That's where you're sort of left completely unmoored.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is not only is there was yesterday. It's not clear that there's a tomorrow either. It's not clear there's a strategy here. It seems a little bit like I'm just trying to get through this meeting, and I'm gonna wait around and I'm gonna splash the water, and then pretty soon the caravan will move on and we'll talk about something else. In the meantime, though, there are all these weird, very worrying kind of signs of this kind of utopian way of thinking about things. Like, let me tell you something about Gaza, man. It's a beautiful beach. We could have a big, as if that those beaches are unique. I mean, like, well, he's been to Tel Aviv. There's beautiful beaches there. They're not that far. You don't have to. There's no market for a resort in Gaza. That just doesn't exist. You know, they got all these minerals. We're going to have all these the mines of them in Ukraine. It's just not going to happen. The idea that you can only that every time you sell, you have to sell something that's going to be a giant windfall for you is worrying, because of course there aren't any windfalls. We live in a world where these things don't happen. It was like when we invaded Iraq and people were saying, "Oh, we're going to get their oil. It's going to be great." Well, that's actually not going to happen. So this is what and then it's to sit there and watch the picture of Keir Starmer there in the Oval Office, and you see he's surrounded by these eunuchs, these sort of nodding, eunuchs in light blue suits like Marco Rubio, who's like sort of utterly emasculated, sort of nodding as this nonsense is being unfolded. It's so strange. It's like everyone has turned into Pete Hegseth voluntarily, which is just a strange thing.
So there's a trade-off question if you're Marco Rubio or if you're one of the people around Trump, right? So Marco Rubio has to endorse this or say what he's saying about Ukraine, which is exactly the opposite of what he would have said about Ukraine a year ago. Or maybe not the opposite, but certainly, at least 45 to 90 degrees departure from where he was before, right? But he also gets to cut Maduro off, right? That's so. One thing he announced yesterday is that we are ending all forms of support of any kind, any American dollars going to Venezuela, which effectively prop up this communist dictatorship in Venezuela. And if you're Rubio, I think you can say to yourself, I'm stomaching one so I can get the other, right? I mean, nothing is unmixed in this world. And if I can do the things that might be necessary to finally rid the world of this monstrous regime, which also has had rippling consequences for the energy markets on the planet, because Venezuela has one of the largest oil reserves on the planet. That's good, right? That's part of the way people got through the first administration until it turned out that they could no longer stomach they were just crosswise of Trump and could no longer last. I want to move on to the comic scene of yesterday, because it is indicative of the problem of appointing people who are not even remotely serious about what they do. I'm referring here to Pam Bondi and Kash Patel and the release of the Epstein documents. So Pam Bondi says, I have the Epstein documents on my desk. Oh boy, they're going to blow your head. They're going to blow your mind. It's crazy how amazing they are. We're releasing them tomorrow. And then Kash Patel releases the documents, and they are Epstein's phone book, right? His Filofax or Rolodex or whatever, his phone book. And then that's what there is to release. And so she says, I demand an immediate investigation into the FBI for why it hasn't released more of the Epstein file. But she told us that the Epstein file was on her desk. She said it's sitting right in front of me. So why doesn't she hand it to, I don't know, Evita Duffy Alonso, Cub reporter, give her a big scoop? Because they weren't on her desk. She doesn't know what's in it. Chances are very good there are no Epstein documents, by which I mean Jeffrey Epstein wasn't keeping physical paper on the people that he was blackmailing. Like people like that, like Meyer Lansky, had it all in their heads. That's what made them successful gangsters, was that they were able to run and control and contain the world of their organized crime by having it in their brains.
Well, that's the famous, from The Wire that everybody always quotes. You take it and notes on a criminal effing conspiracy. That's what you don't do, right? That's why the line is funny.
Yeah, which is why you
that you take
wiretap
notes on a criminal conspiracy.
But that's why the mafia was broken up when they actually went to the wire, when they wiretapped all of the mafia headquarters. So all I'm saying is that's the Attorney General of the United States and the FBI director getting into a fight. She writes him a formal letter demanding that he release to her his documents that she said she had on her desk. Now, this is no way to run a railroad, people, particularly if what you're trying to do is satisfy psychotic conspiracy theorists. Now, by the way, I do think there's a conspiracy around Epstein. I believe that he was probably murdered in jail. I don't care what Bill Barr says. And
wow, I didn't know that.
I'm serious. And I do think that there are many, many people whose lives would be ruined if we found out the extent of their connections with Jeffrey Epstein. And therefore, there is some kind of conspiracy. But I don't think that there is paper on that conspiracy. In fact, in 2008, the federal government made a deal with Epstein in 2008.
2008.
That would have effectively ended any surveillance of him or any effort to figure out what's going on with him.
You just said 2008, John. Do you ever get a sense that there are so many people now in this new Trump administration who aren't done yet talking about? I mean, I expect them tomorrow to have a press conference on Benghazi. These are people who are still stuck in these weird. Who cares about Epstein? I cannot bestir myself to care about it. The idea that the Attorney General and the head of the FBI are talking about it as if somehow we're going to find this. Oh, who is Hillary? Like Hillary, really? I mean, these people are stuck in these old wars. I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to set out a direct mail piece, but who cares?
By them, this is a new war.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not to anybody else. I mean,
I don't think that's true.
It's a new war because what they want is the Kennedy files. Those are 60 years old, or they want the Roswell Area 51 files. Those are 80 years old. Like that's they're not.
You know what? I'll go for those. I'll go for those.
This is like the Grammy New Artist thing, where Epstein is concerned. He's like Doja Cat. They're like Engelbert Humperdinck.
But
as you may know,
nice
I have
reference.
Engelbert Humperdinck. If you watch on YouTube, you can see my Engelbert Humperdinck album over my right shoulder. Anyway,
but the Epstein story. I mean, Rob, I agree with you. I don't care. But it has taken on the sort of Kennedy-like proportions here. It is people who are interested in it, are obsessed with it. There's graffiti in my neighborhood. It says, Epstein was murdered, or Epstein was killed.
John wrote that.
Yeah, right.
But it is a particular interest of people who believe that the world is being
it's an attorney general
and they're being lied
FBI
to.
Director. They should be investing QAnon then.
But they are. This is the thing. This is the mainstreaming. You can start this 15 years ago with the sort of rise in independent podcasting, independent radio state. People, Alex Jones, people like that, getting into the public discussions. And their line is, there's always a story behind the story. The story that you're being fed is a lie. It's all to cover up for the people in power. And this is a major motivating factor behind a significant element of the Trump base.
Yeah.
They believe this, and the problem is that the Epstein story, alone among the stories of the last 15 years, kind of conforms to the idea that something very untoward was going on here. Why did the head of Apollo, Leon Black, just give Epstein $158 million for a piece of tax advice?
Yeah.
Why?
And what did Gene Hackman and his wife know?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What did they know? Randy Quaid is asking that very question.
Yeah. Randy Quaid apparently, Abe, check the neighborhood. Maybe John is spray painting that.
Yeah. Randy Quaid said this morning on Twitter that Gene Hackman gets a lot of money from residuals, and therefore somebody killed him for the residuals money. which is interesting because I doubt he really gets a lot in residuals.
Yeah, not at this point. No.
Yeah, no, nor would he have, since movies don't have residuals.
That's true. Well, they do, don't they?
They have kind of, but it's not like they don't have residuals like TV shows, and he hasn't been on TV and since he was on The Naked City 80 years ago or whatever. So I don't think he's got a lot of money coming in that way. But yeah, every celebrity, everything where they can, and this goes to Abe. Let's talk about your ongoing point, which is that one of the things that's going on in America is that we don't get answers about things anymore. Things are not resolved. And that creates this atmosphere that they're not resolved because somebody is stopping them from being resolved, not because we've gotten incompetent or because we hold out hope because of pop culture, because of CSI and NCIS and shows like that, everything can be solved by the lab guys.
Yeah.
They can find a strand of hair and it'll prove that, ex-industrialist killed, had so-and-so killed in prison.
But it really, I mean, I do think a large part of it is because of incompetence, but that feeds the suspicion nevertheless. I mean, it's not always trying to hit.
Yeah, or human nature. It's not incompetence exactly. It feels like it's incompetence because we used to get answers on things, but then there must have been many. There are many. We don't know who the Zodiac killer was. There are many things we don't know that in historical terms were not knowable because there was no way to find them out, and technology wasn't there, and our ability to follow things wasn't there, and all of that. It's not like it's anything new. No one knew where Judge Crater went. No one, nobody knew who killed the Black Dahlia. There are all kinds of unsolved cases in the history of mankind. Now we think, well, all cases should be solvable.
The culture also was more trusting back then. So if someone said case closed, the public was more likely to accept it.
Right.
I mean, they've said that Epstein wasn't murdered, right? That's, as you said, Bill Barr said that. There might have been a time a few decades earlier when people would have accepted that.
I mean,
wasn't there so the other aspect to the comic scene that John was describing was who were getting presented, right? We didn't get to the binders part where they were presented. Influencers were presented with the binders at the White House 15 minutes ahead of whenever it was put online, right? And they had these big binders that said Epstein files. And, one of them wasn't the Pizzagate guy, one of the influencers who was given a binder. Wasn't he?
Yeah.
There's like a circular thing here.
We got Libs of TikTok,
DC Drano.
Yeah,
he'll get to the bottom.
And then a couple of other people's.
If
I could just do a quick intervention. Libs of TikTok. It's been a wonderful Twitter account for several years. Mistreated, deplatformed, all of that. Her name was Chaya. She's an Orthodox Jew. Chaya, you are spinning out of control. Get yourself start. You've done very good work. We're your friends. Get away from these people. They're driving you crazy, and they are ruining your Twitter feed, and they are harming your influence. And I think you might listen to us. So take my advice. You are going down the wrong path. Okay, that's my message to Chaya of Libs of TikTok. But yeah, look. Jacob Weisberg once said, I think very amusingly, that there was a reason why Hollywood loved conspiracy plots, right? Like Hollywood loved to make the thing about, it's the businessman who is doing not the da-da-da and all of that. And he said, it's because that's actually how Hollywood works. People are always plotting against everybody else. I just read a really good book. Kenneth Turan has written a book on Irving Thalberg and Louis B. Mayer for the Jewish Live series at Yale. Kenneth Turan, longtime movie critic and writer for the Los Angeles Times. And Thalberg and Mayer were the two great picture producers of the golden age of the 1930s, and Thalberg died young at 37. And the entire story that they tell is Mayer scheming against Thalberg. Or people scheming against each other. This is how Hollywood began. They were all hard scrabble, working class guys who didn't want things taken away from them. They were plotting it. And so Hollywood was born as a kind of conspiracy factory. And so they have retailed the conspiracy theories to us about how America really works, because that's how their business actually works, Rob. And so I think that that's something that, because of popular culture's love of the conspiracy plot, now everybody kind of like gives into the conspiracy plot. Rob, does this comport with your...
It's a great idea. It's funny in that, I mean, I just think the larger point is that it's easy to think ill of the world if you work in Hollywood, where it all seems like chaotic and evil. I think mostly people feel in show business that it is in fact chaos, and that no one really has it's a power vacuum. No one is actually in an office plotting against you specifically. They're just in an office like rats in a coffee can. They'll go anywhere. The conspiracy theory movement seems to me to be sort of this neurotic need from people to believe that there are grown-ups in charge of everything, whether they're malevolent grown-ups or not. It's like a Gnostic view, right? It's like you have to believe that there's the demiurge is in charge. It's sort of the same. It's one thing or the other. It's like God, demiurge, devil. It doesn't matter to me as long as there's a plan and a plot here. And it's also an excuse for why my life is so miserable, is because, well, obviously I'm not an oil company. The big chemical companies want me to feel this way. And then every now and then you'll meet somebody who's, like, usually in my experience, very, very talented, almost always an actor, very, very talented. And you'll have this conversation with that person and it'll be fun. And then suddenly they'll say, well, steel doesn't melt at a certain temperature. And you think, oh no.
Yeah.
I remember standing in front at the craft services table with one of the crew and just having a donut and coffee and just talking about nothing. And he said, well, the Jews only let us think what they, certain things. And he sort of sauntered off. I was like, hey, come back here. You're in show business. You can't say that. But, it's like.
If only that were true.
If only it were true, yeah.
By the way, quick shout out to our friend Eli Lake, his podcast Breaking History, which is his current episode is literally about this. It's about the JFK conspiracy through the ages and how Oliver Stone's movie JFK may be the most influential piece of popular culture ever produced, because it did literally cause the writing of the legislation to declassify the JFK files back in 1992 or 93 when the movie came out, that are finally that supposedly we're about to get our hands on. And that, of course, the secret, as he says, is that if the files do not reveal that Oswald was, didn't do it and whoever else did it, that these files were compromised, and that they were the real evidence was long since destroyed. So who needs the files? So anyway, it's a wonderful podcast at Breaking History, Eli's podcast. So talking about show business, this weekend, Sunday night, we have the culmination of months of planning, an event that used to be a major American event on par with the Super Bowl, and is now a not particularly major event on par with nothing. That is, of course, I think it's the 97th annual Academy Awards. Easily the pop cultural event of the year throughout my childhood and adolescence and young adulthood. Now I think they're lucky to get 14, 15 million people to watch it, if that. Whereas, of course, the Super Bowl is watched by 115 million people or something like that. So used to be 40 or 50 million people would watch the Oscars. So now the Oscars exist as a moment of crisis. Like, it's the point where people write the pieces about how the movies don't matter anymore, and this is the end of movies, and only streaming, and what it used to be that people like to watch, that now they don't, and no one goes to the theaters and all that. Rob, you are not someone who has worked in the motion picture part.
Thank God, I'm a writer. We're writers, don't work in movies.
Right? Yeah. The great joke about the, as you know, the greatest, Polish joke.
Yeah.
I'm now going to tell the greatest Polish joke. You'll excuse me. I would call it stupid person joke, and I'm awash in admiration for the Polish people. So I'm just using that.
Wow. Talking about how could you ruin the setup even more? I don't know.
No, it's like, do you know about the Polish starlet on the motion picture? In order to get a bigger part, she slept with the writer.
Yeah. The way to tell the joke, just pervasively.
Yeah, okay.
Did you hear about the Polish actress? She slept with a writer. You don't need all the other stuff.
You don't say slept with, because that also, that's, you got to use the harsher or the
but either way, fewer words. You don't need the whole thing.
Okay. Yeah. So you're a writer, and so this is not a thing for you. Working in the motion picture business, but the decline of the motion picture business and the prestige of the motion picture business has had effects down the chain. I think, like, movies not being central cultural events anymore lowers pop culture's ability to create major cultural events, and
it lowers Hollywood's ability to do that.
Right, but I mean, the massification, right? So you have the ability of things to drive cultural conversations. That's movies used to drive cultural conversations in the United States for. Now, I've said this before on this podcast, like, the motion picture industry really began 110 years ago with Charlie Chaplin in 1915 becoming the world's most famous person, and the creation of Birth of a Nation, the first giant mega hit that was ever released. It's 110 years. That's a long time for a medium to dominate the culture.
Yeah.
Like,
I've said that on the pages of commentary. It's time to take a breath.
Right. Yeah. So, but with the Oscars coming there, for all we can now watch for is the politics. That's the problem. The problem is that nobody cares about what wins, and the two movies that are really up for Best Picture are the leading candidates. There are three, but let's say there are two. That's Anora and The Brutalist. Each has made about $15 million at the box office, which means that they've sold, 1 million tickets each, as opposed to, say, Oppenheimer, which sold 40 million tickets or 50 million tickets or something like that by the time its run was over. So no one's seen them. No one in America has seen them. Many people will not have heard of Anora or The Brutalist. Yeah. The only movie that seems to still be in the running that did have some audience, like 75 million at the box office, is Conclave, the movie about the eerily well-timed movie about the about the death of a pope and the College of Cardinals picking a new pope, which you'd almost think somebody did something at the Vatican to Pope Francis to get this in the news to help the Oscar rating.
I didn't realize you had more room in your brain for conspiracies. It seemed to me that you're filled with Epstein and QAnon. QED. So now we're going to add the Vatican.
QED.
Yeah.
QED. So let's just talk about politics and the Oscars. Two issues. One issue involving two issues involving politics. One, trans issue very much interrupted by the fact that the first trans nominee for an Academy Award, Carla Sofia Gascon, the star, the titular character in Emilia Perez, was found to have issued tweets that people have deemed racist and anti-immigration and all of that. So you're not going to vote for the woke nominee if the woke nominee is anti-woke.
Yeah.
Right? If you're casting a woke vote, that person's got to be woke down the line. She's got to be welcoming in illegal aliens. She's got to be talking about how wonderful it is that there's representation for underrepresented people. And she did the opposite in Spanish in 2021.
Right.
And some enterprising anti-Emilia Perez Oscar campaigner, dirty trickster, went and looked.
Well, the PMK for the other people. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but someone who they said, you know what? You read Spanish. Go read your Twitter feed.
Yeah. Find out everything you can about the people, the people that you're just honored to be nominated with.
Yeah. So trans. I don't know what they're doing about trans. That was their big play for trans. It's sort of like off the table. So now we have basically Israel and Gaza. So I just want to give people a guide to the Israel and Gaza issue. One is the red hand. Seth, can you explain the red hand issue?
Yeah, sure. So their artist for ceasefire is like a pro-Palestinian pressure group that coordinates protests among artists and actors and famous people. And so they wear a pin that is also, I think, the kind of insignia of the Artists for Ceasefire, that is a red hand. They say it's orange, so maybe it's orange with red, lacing around it. But it's a red hand, and it's held out in front, palm forward, like it's giving you a high five, and it's meant to signify the support for the Palestinians. However, the sign, the hand out, is actually from one of the more infamous events of the Intifada, when
Intifada was 25 years ago.
Right, when a couple of Israelis wandered into the wrong area, and they were taken to the police station by Palestinian police, who were, theoretically going to protect them from mobs, or, and turn them over to the Israelis. That's the policy when Israelis get lost. And the mob overcame, I don't know how much resistance there really was, but the mob broke in and with their bare hands killed these two Israelis. And one of the perpetrators, held up his bloody hand to the window to show the crowd outside, to which they had tossed one of the bodies. It's a proof of murder, right? And which they had tossed one of the bodies to the crowd from there. And that hand and that picture became very famous. And that hand is the model for that. And so the pin that they're going to be wearing, they're going to say, well, it's really orange. It's not red. It's burnt magenta. How can you call it red? It's obviously, chartreuse or so. But the larger point is that even if you take them at their word, you have to understand how disingenuous that is. The red right hand is one of the oldest symbols in popular culture of bloody revenge. It is, it goes back to the very beginning. It goes to, to Dante, right? Is that the first appearance of it? It signifies bloody revenge. And so you can move from that all the way through to the Troubles, Ireland, and the red right hand. And everywhere the red right hand has been used, in fact, it was even the theme song to Peaky Blinders, which tells you why that what connection is. The red right hand has always symbolized that. And so even if you want to pretend you didn't know the thing about the Intifada, that's first of all. Second of all, now we all know, everybody has been informed. They did this last year at the award shows. They wore the pins. They were told what it represented. And so what we're waiting to see is, knowing that that's what it represents, will they wear the pin again?
So Mark Ruffalo is one of the leading lapels, has one of the leading lapels to hold the red right-hand pin. It is within the power of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences to refuse to allow people to attend the ceremony if they are wearing the pin. If you've been to a concert, you've been to any major event in the United States in the last 4 or 5 years, you can't bring in your phone. Sometimes they give you this is it called a Fonder bag, or the Ponder bag. You put your phone in, they lock it, they give it to you afterwards. Literally, security could stop people as they're coming in saying, please give me that pin and I will put it in a bag and you can pick it up afterwards. They are not doing that. So they are implicitly saying that it's okay for the elite of the motion picture business to come in wearing a sign of Jewish slaughter. Talk about Irving Thalberg and Louis B. Mayer and the moguls who created the industry, Carl Laemmle and Adolf Zucker and all of that, and the Warner Brothers, assenting in some sense to this display of resistance that is not, nonviolent, but is literally a celebration of violence. It's unthinkable.
I just want, by the way, I want to correct myself really quickly.
Yeah.
I apologize. It's Paradise Lost, not Dante. I was
so
very late, very tired. Had only
it's
a little bit. John Milton's
yeah.
Paradise Lost is the original. So it's nearing 400
years
old.
Another epic poem.
It does matter, but okay.
It matters, and I'm making a note. I'm making a note for the files when we have your Severance performance review. You used too many big words, and you mentioned too many epic poems.
But the Red Hand issue, when Seth says, now that they know what it is, this reminds me of From the River to the Sea. That knowing its origins and its true significance and meaning doesn't stop anyone. I don't. It's not like, I didn't realize this was for violence.
Maybe increases it.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
No, look, I mean, when I say they could make them take off their pins, I mean, if they had a pin that was, NAMBLA, if they wanted to walk in wearing a NAMBLA pin, they wouldn't be allowed to walk in wearing a NAMBLA pin. But pins that advocate and support the mass slaughter of Jews should be in that category. So that's Israel and Gaza number one. Israel and Gaza number two is that among the 5 nominees for a documentary feature is a film called No Other Land. No Other Land, we are told, has been made by a collective, an Israeli-Palestinian collective. 4 directors, Basil Adra, Hamdan Balal, Yuval Abraham, and Rachel Zor. An act of resistance on the path to justice during the ongoing conflict in the region. And it's an archive of videos and handmade films about how how monstrous and evil Israel is. And so this movie does not have a distributor in the United States, though somehow mysteriously it is the highest grossing of the 5 documentaries nominated. I will assume because they're streaming it on some services for purchase, and that Qatar may be buying 150,000 streams to get the numbers up to try to convince people to distribute it in the United States. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's what Qatar does. That's the kind of thing you do when you're trying to get something promoted. And there is a lot of talk that it's going to win. And if it wins, there will be this is going to be a very, it won the best documentary at the Berlin Film Festival. Basically, which makes sense because Triumph of the Will, of course, would have also won the Berlin Film Festival in 1934 had it been released, if there were a Berlin Film Festival. So, it may win, and if it does win, there will be a speech, and it will be this year's version of Jonathan Glazer's speech last year about how Israel is evil. And the transformation of the motion picture business from being so sort of like relatively Zionist that when Vanessa Redgrave said Zionist hoodlums were trying to prevent me from winning my Oscar when she won in 1976. And then I think it was somebody else, Patty Chayefsky, came out upon winning his Oscar and said Vanessa Redgrave is a disgusting and foul monster and an awful person. Patty Chayefsky, a longtime commentary subscriber, by the way, before his death, and of course the author of the most neocon movie ever made, Network, did go after Vanessa Redgrave. That was the one time the audience booed, and it was a very big moment. And now, of course, we're going to see celebration. We may well see celebrations, and so basically, I think it would be really nice if eventually the Oscars ended up on Tubi. That's what I.
Well, that could be. I mean, the Oscars are closer and closer to like the National Book Awards, right? It's like, well, that's sort of interesting. You put it on the cover. I mean, I'm just thinking about this before this podcast. I was like, well, what can you say about the Oscars? I think what you can say is that whatever they are or they're going to be, it's not clear. They aren't what they were. They aren't even what they were last year. they have not yet become what they are. It seems like decline, because it seems like decline in the movie business in general, and that this is just about bellwether of that decline. I mean, whatever the political statements are on Sunday or Monday, whenever it is, they're going to be fewer people will see them than ever. There are more people know who.
So it's like MSNBC.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
like a show on MSNBC.
Probably. Actually, I mean, when you queue up MSNBC over the week, because they replay these things 90,000 times, MSNBC might actually be bigger.
The Oscars, they got to bring back the slap.
Oh, we need a new slap? Yep. It's like you never know.
That was the last time, yeah.
Well, why not just make it an annual thing? With Will Smith, just have him there every year.
Well, it's like How I Met
Your Mother. You don't know when he's going to slap.
Well, it's like how the ongoing plot line on How I Met Your Mother is you never knew when the slap was going to come because Jason Segel owed Neil Patrick Harris a slap.
That's right.
And this was a running through line. Could have happened any time. Could have done it more than once. All of that. It is kind of a good running drama. There were Oscars used to have running dramas like fights between Jack Benny and George Burns or Fred Allen or would Bob Hope get an honorary Oscar because he would always complain about not getting one or something like that. Anyway, you're right. Here are some aspects of the Oscars that we know about. They aren't doing songs. There are not going to be any musical numbers except apparently it's going to open with a musical number from Wicked, the one nominated musical. I think this was a way of avoiding having numbers from Emilia Perez parading on the Oscars, which, though that might be fun for the trans supporting community, ABC maybe thought might be alienating for its mass audience.
She will be there, right?
Yes, Carla Sofia Gascon, who has been depersoned and disappeared down the rabbit hole. Netflix has agreed to pay for her plane ticket. She is a nominee for Best Actress, and so her plane ticket Netflix has grudgingly agreed with its $18 billion in profit to buy her a plane ticket. They are so mad at her. They really thought they had this one in the bag. They never had it in the bag. It's one of the worst movies ever made. Everybody hates it. Nobody was going to vote for it for Best Picture, in my view. So that was a delusion on Netflix's part. And they can now blame Carla Sofia Gascon on the fact that they stupidly purchased this awful, unwatchable movie for their service, thinking that they could get an Oscar from it. But
and it's one Oscar will have something to do with music anyway, right?
Or no, Zoe Saldana will likely win the Best Supporting Actress Oscar, and I will actually say she is deserving of it. It's the one feature of the movie that isn't unspeakable.
I will say I watched just this week one of the Oscar contenders, and I enjoyed it, and it's sort of relevant. A Real Pain. I watched.
People like that movie.
Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, and I think Culkin is
a
favorite.
Considered a prohibitive favorite to win the Best Supporting Actor Oscar.
We might get a Holocaust movie and the Jews are Nazis movie, but also the other thing about the No Other Land, by the way, is that because it's the collective, we may have to deal with we may get an Israeli anti-Zionist or whatever speech, and similar to what we
Jonathan
had
Glazer's, right?
Yeah,
they have almost the replica
anti-Zionist speech, yeah,
and that went over very well.
Oh yeah, it was really great. It was great for them. I have a piece up today at the Washington Free Beacon, a review of The Brutalist, which is one of the two real front runners for Best Picture. And is a very, very complicated, very interesting, and I think in the end, very evil movie, which I try to explain, because it is, as a producer friend of mine said, maybe the most Zionist movie ever made. Startlingly, it's a movie about a Holocaust survivor who comes to America and eventually ends up in Israel, but I won't. Spoiler alert, he ends up in Israel, but why he ends up in Israel is that America is so awful that he needs a refuge from America that Israel was created to provide Jews in America living with the horrors of anti-Semitism to flee to the Middle East. Because they need refuge from evil capitalists and anti-Semites.
Who thought it was the most Zionist movie ever made?
Well, it is very pro-Israel.
Yeah, I would say it's number 2 after the 10 Commandments.
Well, and Exodus, but I mean, so in this atmosphere, having a movie where it's like we're going to go to Israel and there's a sort of celebration. There's a scene where you see the creation of the state of Israel, the celebrations of the creation of the state of Israel in 1948 and all that. Anyway, it's a I
don't know. Nothing beats Charlton Heston, the Lord your God. That's a pretty great.
He doesn't talk
dialogue
about Israel.
It's implied when you cross the Red Sea, you're going in one direction.
Moses doesn't get there.
You're not going to the Ammon resort at Gaza.
Dies on the promontory without being allowed entrance into the Holy Land. Who's your Messiah now? Right? That was always Billy Crystal's imitation of Edward G. Robinson. Yeah, Edward G. Robinson. So anyway,
it's not his fault. It's hard.
Wins. That's a Zionist movie, but very anti-American.
Okay. So
we got that. And then we have Anora, which is the sex worker, is a person too.
I think Anora is
sensational. To
me, Anora is a good movie, but it feels like a movie. It's about it's a little dangerous. It's got some crime in it. It's got some scary spooks. It's got some sex in it. It's like there's a picture. What do you want? A roadmap, as they say in Barton Fink. Tony Shalhoub looks at John Turturro has been assigned to do a wrestling movie, and Turturro's asking about it. He goes, "Hey, it's a wrestling picture. What do you want? A roadmap?" It's like, come on, it's a movie. Like it's got a thing and a guy, and she's scary. It's scary, and there's like mobsters and stuff. It's good. Like make them more Anora. They should if they should give Anora all the awards so that people say to themselves, you know what? No more sad movies about Zionist architects. All due respect. Make the movie the thing. People in the thing. I mean, even Conclave, which I loved, was it's like you could lose 12 minutes.
Conclave is beautiful to look at. It does literally have the worst ending of any movie I've ever seen, but that's okay.
I liked it.
That's okay. You like the ending. Okay, well,
I did.
A twist.
I will tell you this story. The spoiler alert. If you haven't seen Conclave, I'm sorry, but I was at a table reading years ago when The Crying Game was in the theaters. I hadn't seen it, and I'm sitting there with my coffee. It's like Wednesday morning, and we're all talking about ready to start, and then we're talking about movies. And Ted Danson says to me, he goes, "Hey, have you seen Crying Game?" And I said, "No, I'm excited." He goes, "Yeah, it's really great, really great." She plays a good part. She is really good. I thought, okay, now I don't have to see this movie because, I know exactly what you're trying to tell me. Like, you idiot! But he thought he was being, ruining the movie for me. So at no point in The Crying Game was I surprised because Ted Danson gave it away. Show business anecdote now done for the day.
Two historical spoiler experiences of mine. Okay, one. Went to see Murder on the Orient Express, the original with Albert Finney and everybody.
Yeah,
1974, 59th Street and 3rd Avenue. Long line outside the theater waiting to get it when that used to be a thing. And there were exit doors on 59th Street between 3rd and 2nd where people, when the movie was over, came out of the exit doors and you were online and you basically had to cut a path so people could come out. We're all staying there waiting. I think it's Christmas Day, so it's kind of cold. People walk out. Somebody walks out, looks at everybody, and goes, "They all did it." We should have beaten him to death.
I was 13 years old in line at the North Point Theater in San Francisco to see the premiere of The Empire Strikes Back. Somebody coming out of the 11 a.m. show said, "Darth Vader's Luke Skywalker's father."
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah. And the second one was I was sitting with my friend Judith Regan, the famous publisher.
Sure.
In 1998 or something like that, going to see The Sixth Sense. And Judith, a very, very, very intelligent and careful, close reader of things, we're watching, and it's about 15 minutes in, and she says to me, "Bruce Willis is a ghost."
While you're watching the movie.
Well,
While
she
you're watching,
figured it out.
at least you were in.
Okay.
Well, she figured it out. That's fair. That's fair.
And you know, when you have that experience, it's almost irrepressible because you're like, I got it. You know, it's like I solved the puzzle. I know what the pangram is. Do you want to know what the pangram is? Anyway. All right, Rob Long, you got to go.
I got to run. I'm sorry to say.
We got to go too. Have a good weekend, everybody. Watch or don't watch the Oscars. Start getting ready to write angry emails to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences if bad stuff happens about Israel. Please do that. It actually does make a huge difference. Tweet it, go on social media, do all of that. Make them feel bad. Make them worry. For Abe and Seth, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.